Inanna was about to ascend from the underworld when the Inanna, the judges of the underworld, seized her. They said, "No one ascends from the underworld unmarked. If Inanna wishes to return from the underworld, she must provide someone in her place." As Inanna ascended from the underworld, the Gala, the demons of the underworld, clung to her side. The Gala were demons who know no food, who know no drink, who eat no offerings, who drink no libations, who accept no gifts. They enjoy no lovemaking. They have no sweet children to kiss. They tear the wife from the husband's arms. They tear the child from the father's knees. They steal the bride from her marriage home. The demons clung to Inanna. The small Gala who accompanied Inanna were like reeds the size of low picket fences. The large Gala who accompanied Inanna were like reeds the size of high picket fences. The one who walked in front of Inanna was not a minister, yet he carried a scepter. The one who walked behind her was not a warrior, yet he carried a mace. Ninshabur, dressed in a soiled sackcloth, waited outside the palace gates. When she saw Inanna surrounded by the Gala, she threw herself in the dust at Inanna's feet. The Gala said, "Walk on, Inanna. We will take Ninshabur in your place." Inanna cried,
"No. Ninshabur is my constant support. She is my sukul who gives me wise advice. She is my warrior who fights by my side. She does not forget my words. She set up a lent for me by the ruins. She beat the drums for me at the assembly places. She circled the housing places of the gods, tore out her eyes, her mouth, and her thighs. She dressed herself in a single garment like a beggar. Alone, she set out for Nippur in the temple of Enlil. She went to in the temple of Nana. She went to Eridu in the temple of Enki. Because of her, my life was saved. I will never give Ninshabur to you."
The Gala said, "Walk on, Inanna. We will accompany you to Uma." In Uma, at the holy shrine, Shara, the son of Inanna, was dressed in a soiled sackcloth. When he saw Inanna surrounded by the Gala, he threw himself in the dust at her feet. The Gala said, "Walk on to your city, Inanna. We will take Shara in your place." Inanna cried,
"No, not Shara. He is my son who sings hymns to me. He is my son who cuts my nails and smooths my hair. I will never give Shara to you."
The Gala said, "Walk on, Inanna. We will accompany you to Bad Tabira." In Bad Tabira, at the holy shrine, Lulal, the son of Inanna, was dressed in a soiled sackcloth. When he saw Inanna surrounded by the Gala, he threw himself in the dust at her feet. The Gala said, "Walk on to your city, Inanna. We will take Lulal in your place." Inanna cried,
"Not Lulal. He is my son. He is the leader among men. He is my right arm. He is my left arm. I will never give Lulal to you."
The Gala said, "Walk on to your city, Inanna. We will go with you to the big apple tree in Uruk." In Uruk, by the big apple tree, Dumuzi, the husband of Inanna, was dressed in his shining, meaty garments. He sat on his magnificent throne. He did not move. The Gala seized him by his thighs. They poured milk out of his 7 churns. They broke the reed pipe which the shepherd was playing. Inanna fastened on Dumuzi the eye of death. She spoke against him the word of wrath. She uttered against him the cry of guilt.
Take him! Take Dumuzi away!
The Gala, who know no food, who know no drink, who eat no offerings, who drink no libations, who accept no gifts, seized Dumuzi. They made him stand up. They made him sit down. They beat the husband of Inanna. They gashed him with axes. Dumuzi let out a wail. He raised his hands to heaven, to Utu, the god of justice, and beseeched him, O Utu, you are my brother-in-law. I am the husband of your sister. I brought cream to your mother's house. I brought milk to Ningal's house. I am the one who carried food to the holy shrine. I am the one who brought wedding gifts to Uruk. I am the one who danced on the holy knees, the knees of Inanna. Utu, you are a just God, a merciful God. Change my hands into the hands of a snake. Change my feet into the feet of a snake. Let me escape from my demons. Do not let them hold me. The merciful Utu accepted Dumuzi's tears. He changed the hands of Dumuzi into snake hands. He changed the feet of Dumuzi into snake feet. Dumuzi escaped from his demons. They could not hold him. Salutations from space, folks. This is Gemini Brett of More Than Astrology, here with another episode, another chapter of the 13th flower, the Venus work. And here with the most magical Marya Stark.
Hello.
Marya, how in the heavens are you?
I am full spectrum. It's a dynamic time, being October of 2016, with many interesting happenings, and we can't, unless we're not on our internet, we can't help but being completely mesmerized by what's happening in the world. So I'm doing my best to stay really positive and amused and sovereign and sober during the whole election debacle. And personally, I'm feeling pretty vibrant and happy and thriving and doing the things that I love the most. So that's all good news.
And there's so much that you love. So it's always tricky when you and I talk, because I could ask a question, it could go in a million directions, and that's part of the Gemini medicine that you and I share anyway. But I guess I should just start by asking this phrase that you helped me learn, which is, what is most alive for you right now?
What's most alive for me right now is that I have an album with Mama Crow called Remembrance that's just about to be done. She's going to be coming over here today. We're listening to the masters right now, and for our album, for our project Scarlet Crow. So that is very alive, getting into pre-release around these songs of remembering the divine feminine and remembering where we came from and remembering to sing the songs of the ones who didn't get their morning songs, and so that's really alive. Another thing that's alive is in that same vein is another album that I'm producing called Lineage, which is an album worth of songs that are womb chants. They were born from the center of women's circles doing deep ancestral womb healing, clearing work. And so these songs are being written and produced and recorded right now with a lot of different women in my life as a prayer offering for the community, especially for the beings who are really engaged in women's work and doing sort of this reclaiming and healing and naming and deeper underbelly, pulling the rug up and sweeping out the dust work of their psyches, and creating musical offerings for that community and for all the people that those communities interact with. And so those things are really alive. I'm also leading right now this project called Voice of My Womb, which is a workshop series with a group of women, and we're singing some of these songs and we're writing our own. So I get to be in this really fun position of being a provocateur and a question asker, and kind of like the guide through the dark tunnels of of these beautiful questions that relate to our experiences as women, and get to just be sitting in circle with women who are just discovering their own genius and getting to play inside of each other's genius. And it's a total delight. It's something that I have wanted to do for years, and now I'm getting to do it in a really fun and creative way. And just every time we have a class, it just feels like I'm getting married to myself or something.
How can men support that work, or support women in that work?
Yeah. How can men support women in that work? That's a good question. As a man, what do you think, Gemini?
I think I'm confused about it personally.
Yeah.
I mean, I think some women have been really inspirational in helping men in my community kind of establish men's group.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested in humans groups and men and women coming together. There's
Right.
long-standing traditions we know of women's circles and Moon Lodge, and I mean, sometimes it feels like we're missing out on something so cool that I think that for the awakening individual, if we want to use that term, it can actually literally like be like a source of envy, I find.
Uh-huh.
Or like non-inclusion, and that is a very important feeling that comes up for me that I really want to sit with and not just avoid and call it bad or something like that. You know what I mean? So, and I'm not in like a partnership right now with a partner who's engaged in the work. I think I would have a little bit more understanding and just in my own experience of how I could support, that woman. I support a lot of different women, just in my job, and providing astrological counsel, because so many women who are engaging with womb work and lower chakra work in general, I think are really helping me to bring more awareness into embodiment in general. But the awakening for them that seems to come through that work can be, astrology can just be really confirmed and supported. So that's one way that I can. I'm just wondering, like, as a human being, as a Brett, what do I do? Is it like, just like hands off, know that it's happening, like give my prayers for that, support the albums, tune into it? Is it more supportive for me to not be involved in it, you see what I'm saying, than to be involved somehow? I guess that's my question.
These are such great questions. And I think is like one of the reasons I've resisted like coming forward in any sort of leadership role around doing women's work is I think this same feeling of like, I really don't want to be exclusive. There's a part of me that really loves inclusion and really strives for balance, and like as a music therapist, especially working with special needs, like that's one of my main trajectories and like sort of concerns is like, how do I get everyone in the circle feeling good and happy and included and participatory? And then what I've noticed and what I've learned in just reading and in discovery and being in women's circles is that there's something that happens biologically, I think, that's totally unconscious, that when women are together, that there's this sort of like a permission for a vulnerable voice that may have been quieted and never spoken before to come through and have a strength for maybe the first time. then that work is really dynamic, so that when we then come into the gender alchemy circles, that voice has been heard and reinforced in a way that maybe they have not felt safe, even in the presence of one compassionate man like that. And this isn't a bagging on men, right? It's just like, if one man comes into a room of women, everybody's body posture changes. Like it's a primal, I think, thing that happens. And so there is this level of just, I think, acknowledgement of that, and not making that like a shaming or a bad thing. And I think for the same, if one woman walks into a group of like 10 men, right, the energy completely just going to change. Just like, right. So there's a value, I think, of gender work. And yeah, like it's a careful, I always find this like a careful thing, because I also don't want to be exclusive of people who are sort of in a place where like, well, I don't actually fit into the gender binary, and like, where is this for me? And these are all really valuable questions. Like, how do we support gender work when there is work to be done around in healing the gender for the men and for the women in those circles, so that there can be like a reweaving of the hoop of the brotherhood and the sisterhood, so that those circles come together stronger as that Vesica Pisces. So I think that if I was coaching men and how to support women, like you said, like, I think, yeah, doing the work with the brotherhood, as well as getting really curious with the women, like, hey, what are you learning in the women's work? Why is it really valuable for you? Like, what can I learn from the work that you're doing? Like, what are you, like, even asking, like, what is strengthening in you as a woman that from that work, and how can I just like be in like the witness of that and support that? Because I think I think the thing that I found in myself is that I've just become so much stronger as an individual by getting to explore things that have to do with my blood, have to do with my ancestry, have to do with like sexual wounding. And I've been able to bring things to the table with men in my life that I wouldn't have felt safe to bring before, you know, in my own partnership, because of the things that I've did in my women's group. Now I can have a voice in a conversation with my man that I just didn't know how to have before, because I wasn't trained to do that in co-gender groups. I was only trained to do that in these places. So a lot of my mentors are really like, yeah, let's do these individual works. And my mentor, Layla Centurino, she's actually wanting to do this, what you're talking about, this next council wheel for men and women. How do we have co-gender blood circles and moon mysteries for the men and the women? And I think that kind of work is only birthed from like the discovery and the harvesting that's happened, again, from the individual circles and then the coming together. That's, yeah.
You're such a creative coach of communication kung fu. Helpful to hear you. I mean, just like that phrase of, oh, what is strengthening in you, you know, through this work, what is strengthening for you, is really a wonderful guide for me, just energetically, you see. And I love, you know, I mean, for me, my witness, and a lot of this Inanna story, so we're just, you know, let's tap into the story that we've been telling for so long. And I gave you less of an introduction here in this interview than I often do, because you've been at the front of all of these chapters, right? And people who are watching know that you are narrating this Inanna story along with me and creating original music and supporting this in so many ways. And that's just been such a treat. And your friendship and your guidance has been irreplaceable in so many ways for me these last couple of years. And it's been nice to collaborate in this project together. And I'm really excited to have your voice heard in this interview, and hopefully more moving forward as well. But this part of the story, right? I mean, Inanna's coming back from the underworld, and, you know, in the spiritual work, this is her retrieving these different adornments that she had to abandon on the way down. And where we are in the process right now, she's reclaimed root chakra, sacral chakra, and she's kind of working out third chakra, solar plexus. So sovereignty is a theme that you mentioned that's certainly alive for me right now too. But one thing that's most fascinating to me in this story, as you know, is that Dumuzi is taken in her place. And though Inanna kind of courageously went into the underworld, Dumuzi runs away as fast as he can, prays to Utu to have his hands and feet turned into serpents and then antelopes. And there's something about that to me. There's something I find when inviting the experience of the masculine and the feminine within and without, that it is that feminine side that not only metaphorically, spiritually, but like literally, like in women biologically, is more advanced at seeing in the dark. One thing I noticed in you that I love, because this is something I'm a keen observer, is that when we talk about the masculine and the feminine, usually it's hard not to do that with some kind of gesticulation magic involved. And I encourage you to observe that. It's a really wonderful thing. And I love that too, because the words and also the imagery is one of the ways that these energies dance and combine. And so what I've realized in my own path is that when I allow more of the yin experience, when I allow myself to relax some of the logical need to know, and my joy in figuring things out that would keep me from receiving vision, and so from seeing in the dark, like sometimes we have our greatest eye openings with our eyes closed, right? That it is that other side that really has helped guide me into places where I experience more of the world than that which I can through my mind alone. And I've been really blessed to have been invited into groups of women. I've been that one guy that comes in. I mean, last time you were here in Seattle, right, in the Women of Wisdom conference.
Right, you are our token dude.
I was your token dude, yeah, and so I want to be a dude, but not just be a token, that's what I'm trying to learn here. But there was this exercise, I can't remember how Laurel what the verbiage was, but it was something about going into your womb and what do you want to give birth to at this time, and Brett, like you could kind of think about something like helping someone else's womb, or you could go into your womb and I was like, I want to go into my womb, right? So, and that is a long response here, but I really, it's odd. I, like to be honest about that envy that I think a lot of the spiritual men or the awakening men. I mean, it's just hard not to go into, it's hard to reach for an adjective there that doesn't sound pretentious or whatever. I shouldn't interrupt myself that way, but the awakening man, it's hard to not have that envy, I think, of the woman who maybe more easily can courageously go into these unseen places that seem to demand a release of control. And then also being able to support that, I feel on my own path, demands that I at least acknowledge that feeling of, do I not belong? And the other side of it is, how can I be strong? I was looking at this chart this morning for the first weekend of July a couple of years ago, because I remember that's when I met our friend Water Drops, and I was talking a lot about this Venus work and then talking a lot about the patriarchies, like demonization of the archetypes, especially the feminine archetypes, and how like Taurus, the cow, has been testiculized into this bull. And you've heard my whole rap about what the hell is a sea goat, and it should be the she goat, and the burning of the witches and these things. And I mean, it's all very important, And Water at one point was like, hey, stop bashing the mask, dude. And it was the first of a few experiences that happened powerfully and close enough together that I really started to understand that the synchronicities were aligning to give me this message that I wasn't necessarily tending to the birth of a balanced experience of feminine and masculine by pointing my finger only at the masculine for the disruption in this world, and by like choosing to walk in a way of like sincere apology, not only for the things that I've done and that's like justified, but for some things that I haven't done, but my gender has, my race has, you know, these kinds of things really come alive. And I feel like that's like some of what my womb like needs to heal, or my root for sure, you know. And I think a lot of the current just kind of political themes and standing rocks really been in my heart lately and that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know where I'm really going with this necessarily, but I think and I feel that the greatest way that I can at least philosophically and compassionately support the women's work is to understand how important it has been for we men, that as women are engaging with this courageous work, and it is courageous work, that we are given more opportunity to go into our own dark spaces and to receive the visions.
And I think that that's so profound, like just the willingness to share that and admit that, because I think that that's a lot of like again, like I feel that, like I feel concern for that envy, right? Like I and the tenderness of that realization around like what is that actually pointing to, that you're speaking of, the like the feminine's capacity to like go into the sort of uncontrolled seeing in the darkness. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of what emerges for me is definitely lensed by certain things I've been reading around. Yeah, I've been like just kind of getting more into some historical contemplations, and I don't know how much of it's true. A lot of it's sort of colored by this anger at the patriarchy, and so there's a sensitivity and like the backlash of the like righteous feminist movement, you know, that came on. It's so valuable, and then there's just a lot of aggression and anger, and understandably so. And again, the one in me who seeks for peace and balance and even making is really in high alert to that. I think that was one of the major questions we had in the Scarlet Crow tour. It's like, you know, how is the backlash of the feminist movement, how is that looking for our men and women now? Like, what's been what gifts came from that intensity? What things are still being worked out? How do we process anger that is thousands of years old in a way that is still not perpetuating blame and shame and creating more chaos? What is it like to hold space for the tenderness of the men's response to the women who are now okay, like let's get together and huddling and like sort of like, how do we do this in a way where we're not fucking like exploding everywhere? And then like the response to that, and it's powerful tracking, you know. I think that this is why I think that the gender alchemy work is so important, is that we're like, I just have this vision of really healthy societies where the men and the women are, as a part of the health of the unit, going and doing a kind of sort of clearing out of like gender roles and what's it like in this biology, and how has the historical overlays participated in how things in relationship have gone really awry, and how communication patterns are slipped into that, and how unconscious control dramas can play into that, and how unconscious sort of body language and intimidation patterns come into play in that, and all of that, so that we can have that conversation and remapping. But there is it's not happening at on a landslide scale yet, you know. And I don't know what it takes for that to happen. I think it I think it takes sort of an acknowledgement, a little bit of a little bit of the science and of the biological differences. I've been really blessed. I think that there's like an allergy to like, oh, we can't acknowledge the differences because then that's, that bodies are just bodysuits and the soul is eternal, and all of that's really true. And like, I think that, as a man, you're like, yeah, you have a creative center, right? You have a womb space, whether you've been a woman like in this life or many other lives, like you have I think a somatic understanding on a certain level of like what that might be like. And in this life, it's different. And you're like encountering this whole like shame the patriarchy thing, and what I wonder, I like love that you share so vulnerably about that. Cause I often wonder what it's like to be a man inside of this like conscious goddess awakening movement. And seeing the women like, let's rise in power together, sisters. And, like I'm definitely, I would love to bring more illumination to that. Like what language, like, cause it's a culture now, and it's a culture. There's definitely like cultural language and meme. And I'm just riding that edge of like, well, what's true and how does that affect people, and not to like diminish what I do because I'm afraid it's going to hurt someone's feelings, but being aware of like, okay, well, what's the repercussion and impact of using these words, and how is that like, and getting that feedback loop going so that we can have these conversations. Because the whole point, I think, for me in my own womb clearing is to have a really strong instrument of peace. Like the womb healing work for me is like, it goes a lot into this singing work and like in divine instrumentation, so that there's this place where we're taught as young people, men and women, to control our breathing, to not breathe, to stop feeling, to like stop crying, or like, oh, don't talk about your feelings, or oh, don't process things, like men and women, right? And in different ways for both of us, from the cultural norms. And so there's this way that we just don't breathe fully into our belly, into our genitals, into our, like, we're all shut down in that way. And so when I got into womb work, it wasn't necessarily about like being a woman thing. It was like, why am I not, what am I shut down from my solar plexus down? Like, what am I not looking at in terms of stories I'm carrying around my sexual power, stories I'm carrying around, like sexual assault situations that, like, in my community, in myself, subtle and gross, in my culture at large. Like, how am I carrying that in my body? How am I carrying all of the things that I didn't speak because it wasn't safe to speak? And this is true for any human, I think. And then and then that just happened to all coincide in like my blood cycle, like learning more about my cycle and my bleeding, and like why I was having so much pain, and then getting into meditative processes of like, oh wow, like I can really like bring awareness and light into that. And like, how do I really, working with Laurel Kitten and like bringing in some of the like the greater mysteries of the blood gates, where she's really like started weaving this loop of like, okay, yeah, the blood mystery of like life and death and birth and like, and bleeding every month, and like, what's the history of that? It just became a rabbit hole of curiosity that I don't think just pertains to women. Like you said, like, I think the hijacks that have happened in the blood gates, and they affect everyone, and I think that we carry the stories differently in our bodies as men and women. And so the women's work for me is really getting into the place of like, how are we actually carrying it in our ovaries and our wombs and our blood every month, so that we can start really bringing more warmth and curiosity and light and energy and vibration into our pelvic floor, and get that breath going so that we can, heal our creative soul, right? Our song spirit. And I think it happens similarly for men. I think that men carry stories of all kinds of crazy shit in their genitals and in their hara and in this like lower region also. And
I do.
yeah, it's it's inevitable. It's
Yeah, and I hope people watching, just like I did as you were speaking, are like, oh yeah, I should actually breathe deep and breathe into my hara and breathe into my root and breathe into my genitals. And there's so much. This is how it is when Marya and I hang out, and it's so amazing to me, expansive. I learned so much, and I feel like you and I are engaged in contemplating very similar things and participating with very similar themes simultaneously from different directions. So it's just really wonderful to share and hear. One thing that's been fascinating me lately is that we literally live in an age, and at least in our community, and like the conscious community, where it's now okay to talk about sex.
Mm-hmm.
That's new, but it's not okay to talk about gender. Right? It's like totally flipped. It's a really fascinating like just that alone is a very fascinating contemplation.
Huh.
And so to speak about gender, I often say this, it's sometimes annoys people, and that's okay because I often do. But one of my favorite gender teachers in my life was my niece Whitney when she was like 6 years old, and she went around the Thanksgiving table and announced, very pridefully that, Nana has a giny and Grandy has a penis and Unc B has a penis and Mama has a giny, and right, she did like the whole thing, and I was like, oh well, you know what, that's like really true. And I don't really know about the womb, right? Because in my physical experience, that's not happening. And I've shared this before in chapters, but one of my feelings around why the yin side, the feminine side, and therefore expressed most often in the power of woman, biology, is the blood mysteries. That literally when the menses, when you're in those gates where that's the thing and it's regular and you're in touch with it and magically in touch with it, well, you're literally experiencing biological death and birth every month, right? And really being tuned to that cycle. And I'm sure that men experience the moon as well, right? I mean, I have my whole thing about I'm a man on my moon and whatever, and I really encourage men to connect to their natal moon phase and look to that cycle. But I've never asked a man, how can I know more about this? I ask sisters, I ask the women about that. Yeah. So I'd love to ask you, I'd like to ask you a little bit more, just this question of what is the womb? But would like to add this piece too. Actually, you know what? Let's just stop there. What is the womb, Marya Stark?
Oh man. My understanding of the womb is it's a place for new life to grow and give birth and be born, and to gestate. I think it's a place for us to draw power from too. Like it's source of light. Like in the Taoist systems, you have your ovaries, and every month they're drawing in releasing stem cells, the stuff that life is made of, and we're hosting it in our womb, the stuff that all life is made of, these stem cells. And we're in this process of like, okay, is it gonna, like, when we're ovulating, we're like in really relational mastery, because we're able to connect and be open to the bliss of relationship, right? Which is what, and ideally helps create life. So that like sexual power is also this relationship power. And then we go into that place of like, okay, now it's time for internal, because the life didn't come in this way. And so it's the time of that releasing those stem cells, that dream, that potential for life, and giving it back into the mystery. And so I think for me, that my womb is a place where all of that is happening all the time. And so it's also this place where it's like I am wiring this like state of arousal from. So like this like sense of extra attentiveness to my surroundings, and like extra attention to the nuances that are possible, that would wake up my senses, that would bring me into a place that I would want to engage sexually to create life. And so like that is happening from this like primal womb place as well. And it's this interesting thing of like where within Taoist practice, it becomes this place where when we focus on our heart, we're doing breathing, we're doing chi, like that's where we're sort of harnessing the light and the magic and the power of the hemens and the power of the earth. And they're like coming into us in our heart and like churning over and like creating this big ball of light that fuels our entire energy system, right? That like creates the source light that we walk in the world with our mission from. So it's this portal to heaven and earth. And it's this portal of uniting these divine forces on this like very cosmic level. And so those are, for me, the value of being in relationship to the womb in a magical way. It's like, okay, there's a portal there. I did this really cool meditation called the voice of your womb, or the name of your womb, where we actually got to go and do like a meditation where we like got to name and have like a secret name of our womb. And men do this too. They have to do this, like the most secret name of your hara. It's like the seed. And it was cool to have it be this magical name of my womb that I knew it her by, that I was able to sort of build a different kind of relationship to the intelligence of that part of my body, that like we think of like, oh, I have a mind intelligence, and now we're starting to get hipper. Oh yeah, well, our heart has neural cells too. We have mind intelligence and heart intelligence, but we're still in this shadow place of like, yeah, and you're like primal like nervous system has an intelligence too, and like it has this intelligence, this like animal mammal reptilian intelligence and this like womb intelligence of like, I like that gut feeling. That's what I always get, where it's like, oh, that's its own intelligence. So having this relationship with that part of my body allows me to have a greater relationship with intuition and with what my gut is saying, with what are all the many, because my mind can make up stories. My heart will want to just love, and my womb's going to know something else. It's going to have a different voice that doesn't give as much of a fuck about logic or loving everyone. You know what I mean? Like it's going to have
Absolutely.
And then, so how did those three intelligences, now we just have more voices at the council, when we're making decisions and when we're operating from life. So that for me is like what womb is for me.
I love that. I love that you describe them too as the council, right? Because there's a lot of training of get out of the head and get into the heart, and not as much speech about get out of the heart and get into the hara, right? But combining those three centers as a council, right? So you might want to get out of your head entirely to access the heart because it might be new, or it might have been so suppressed. We might find the intelligence lower down even more suppressed. The gut like yells if a bus is about to hit you from the side, right? But otherwise, it's sometimes hard to just get in touch with that voice of knowingness that is not thought. And that's not even necessarily feeling as much, right? Yeah, I had the fortune of hearing from a Hawaiian wisdom keeper when I was last there, and they speak about these kind of three, they don't call them the chakras, but like the three centers, right? And so there's like the crown, like where you were connected to the ancestors, and the heart, and then like the seed point, the creation point. And yeah, there's a few things I want to do to bring this back to like Venus cycle. And I guess into the chakras a little bit, and into the essence of the Leo cycle at large. I mean, I could speak with you for a gazillion hours. So one is, well, I really, you mentioned the blood gates before, and I think that's a really important part of this womb awakening and healing that would be really lovely for all of us to hear. So could you describe what the blood gates are?
Sure. My understanding of the blood gates, and this is still sort of a little bit of a newer conceptual framing for me. So I just name that I'm still learning about it and working with it. But my understanding of the blood gates is that there's a hoop of life that when we're born, when we're being born, that we're connected to that place that is beyond the realms, where like the portal opens and the veils are very thin, and like life and death, that it's that gate where there's so much mystery and magic. And so I associate my understanding of the blood gate as this place where life and death are just kind of interchangeable. It's very that like all the mystery, like the veils are lifted and we see kind of into the deeper layer behind what's going on in flesh and bone. And that happens in many stages. We have when we're actually being born as one of the blood gates, when we first give blood, like when we first drop our blood, that first time, that very important rite of passage, right? We have the blood gate when we're giving birth as women, like that, talk to women who have given birth, and it's like one of the most intense experiences, that it's this like extraordinary, ordinary experience happening all the time. People are born, but it's this like wild reunion to full source and beyond, unimaginable, unexplainable experiences giving birth. And then the fourth blood gate in this tradition, it's following the rites of passage of the feminine, is the time when women start holding their blood, right? They're going through a very strict and dynamic physiological change again. Instead of having this cycle, the blood is starting to be drawn up, and now their life as no longer mother, it comes into a crone, it comes into a new holding, and it comes into a new psychic space. And so that period of time is very tender too, where like the veils are thinning. And then dying, right? The fifth blood gate. So we share this with the men, that being born and dying, the blood gate, where things, again, the veils get very thin. And Laurel added the sixth blood gate as being in sexuality, like sexual embrace, that's a time when, again, we have that little death, we have that experience where we can transcend and go into this reunion. And certainly not to say that we can't have other experiences like that, meditation definitely, and like yoga, where we have like exalted, ecstatic, dynamic states of birthing together as a community, right? We're in that kind of birth gate. And then this like primal blood gates, right? Where our blood is really in it, when blood is being shed, when blood is being touched in a way that isn't violent. We have this association with blood as being, someone got cut, they got hurt, or someone got their neck cut, they're dying. Like that's the blood and guts reality. We have this association with blood. It's hard to say. And then, but it's such a natural part of life, right? Like you're being born, there's blood, you're bleeding every month, there's blood, we're having sex, sometimes there's blood, and that the blood is so powerful, and in that recognition. And so some of the work that I've been doing within like what relevance do the blood gates have, and in my life, I've noticed that as I've been in an investigation, right, in the deep dive of like, okay, well, what experiences have I had? What is my birth story? What's my first blood story? What was that like? Like, what was going on in my life at the time? What did I know about bleeding? What did I, did someone tell me it was going to happen, or was there shame around it? Did I think it was disgusting? Like, where did I learn that it was disgusting? What did I think of the smell? Like all of those things that get locked into our psyche around it, that start painting a picture of how we see ourselves and our bodies. And then like, what are my experiences around sex? Like my first time sex, did I want to have sex? Did I not want to have sex? Do I, like these, again, because it's such a raw place, things that get splintered in those times have a very strong impact. And so part of doing the blood gate work is really seeing like, okay, what part of spirit has been fractured in those moments, so we can start reweaving that hoop. So the blood gate gets very strong, so that we're calling in and weaving and breathing, bringing and breathing in life in a way that's not fracturing of our soul. Same time, if I'm giving birth, like I talk to a lot of women in my womb work, who are still recovering from the trauma of giving birth. You know, they didn't plan to have birth in a hospital. They didn't plan to have a C-section or have to have like all these weird things, and that they don't, you know, maybe they're not feeling really like good about their ability as a woman, like just to give birth naturally. Like there's a lot that comes into play around like what we should be as mothers, what we should be as women, how our bodies should work to be like these primal, sexy, fucking wild goddesses. And then if it doesn't match that picture, then like there's something wrong with us, you know, and going and relieving that hoop, right? Like reclaiming we gave birth, we like grew a body. You know, I'm not a mother,
but see, that's a thing too, that pain for women who haven't given birth to a biological child, and the necessity then to make sure we are giving birth, that we are creating. Yeah.
Right. And
so
the ways like, and I can see where that is too, like where like, yeah, I've put blood, sweat, and tears into giving birth to things, and like, and just in projects, and I can associate that same kind of rehooping, like if I have like pieces that haven't completed in births, it's like it leaks energy from how I'm able to show up now. And same with women, I think, who are starting to hold their blood. There's not a lot of information on the pause, on menopause, on like being like where's the place for the older women in our society? Where's the place for the like grandmothers? You know, like there's a I think it's a deep fear of me as a woman of getting older, of like losing my power as like the young maiden energy. You know, like I face that now. I'm like starting to get gray hairs, and I'm like, oh my God. And I can feel it on a weird like level, you know? And so honoring that blood gate of like, what does it take to be in that transition and claim this new power of the wise elder. And I think these phases get marked for men differently because they go through different biological changes. Like for women, as my experience as a woman, like the biology is so intense. It's such an intense experience that it gets marked. So like, I don't know what it's like for a man. I don't know what it's like for your biology, and to have these markings. And
yeah, well, some of the thing I think is that we don't know either. But just for clarity, so the gates are being born, right?
Being born.
Blood.
That's right.
Blood.
First
right?
blood, dropping the blood.
First sexuality.
That comes in as like the sixth, but like giving birth
encompasses all of the gates in a way.
Right.
Giving birth.
Giving birth.
Right. Menopause,
and dying.
Death. Yeah. Yeah, I've been on this movement to rename menopause to Women-O Play.
I love that.
Because why is it about men? But of course that comes from menses, which is blood, and that's where we get the roots for month as well. Yeah. But the play, that it can be an awakening and enlivening, you know, and I've often sit with women, you know, in astrological consultation, whatever, at that time. It's so dynamic, and it's not a day, obviously, right? And really, I've often encouraged folks who have discomfort with the word crone, that feels old or not magical or something, right? And just kind of the maiden, mother, crone terminology, again, for women who have not mothered a biological child or creation, for example, that can be difficult for them. So one of the invitations I extend for people in those life cycles is to rename those, you know. And really creative things come in. It's you know, the greatest thing about my job, right, is that I get to learn so much just in sharing and collecting story, which brings me into history, into her story, you know, and weaving those together as well. So these gates are so interesting, you know. I don't want to get buried into astrological technique, but one thing that we do in astrology, it's called secondary progressions, is to relate days and years. I call it the fourth trimester, and it's not worth diving into now, but it's become a very important technique for me to help understand the rising spiritual being who's really choosing to dance. But the idea is that if something happens when you're 8 days old in the sky, you're still source, you know, and so you're not ready really to integrate that spiritual into the physical And it's like this holographic correlation of day and year, which we can do because the entire cycle of yin and yang happens during the day and happens during the seasons of the years. So that if something is signaled in the heavens when you're 8 days old, it might come into the physical. This technique would suggest it will come into the physical when you're 8 years old. 42 days old will come through 42 years old. And there's a whole nother piece where I haven't felt into how to work with it so much yet, but it's then relating the day to the month, also the month to the year. And that cycle of the month, you see, I think, especially for men, to see like the entire process of yin and yang, right? To see the entire process of yin and yang during the day is so obvious. During the season is so obvious. And during the month, a little bit less obvious, witnessing the phases of the moon, these kinds of things, but it's less obvious logically, right? Much more so experientially. And we could say through the body and physically. And that's something where, gender honored, like women are the teachers for we men in this way. And that women have been asked to ignore that experience, right? This is the voice that's being reclaimed in this return of the divine feminine, we could say, in return of like blood mysteries and core, like the magic of the true sorceress or witch, and these words that have been so demonized and tortured. And so much of your work that I've been able to witness has been an invitation to experience this reawakening, and not necessarily, through womb pulsing or whatever, but listening to the Scarlet Crow songs, just experiencing the magic of Marya Stark in general, like musically, creatively, and the times where we've gotten together and collaborate and these kinds of things. So there's one thing that you touched on earlier that I think is really important here. I think people witnessing this project, if they've been following along with it, will note that it's kind of stalled out a little bit, or that like on the way down for Inanna and the release of all these gates, I was doing something every month and an interview every month, trying to correlate them to the release of the chakras and these kinds of things. And I mean, one side of it is that all these new projects have opened. I'm creating a video course. I have this thing happening with one of my teachers where we do a video, semi-monthly or bi-monthly, whatever. So whatever, there's a lot there, but some of it too has been fear of speaking from the voice of gender alchemy through the mouth of a man and a man's body. Because one of my contemplations that I have a hard time, or I'm afraid to bring forward into the community, is what is the difference between the divine feminine and the divine feminist? And yeah, so at least wrap it in somewhat humorous language, it's easier to approach. But you mentioned this earlier of going back into the history, going back into the wounding, going back into the burning, the burying, the suppression, and understanding authentically. It's so beautifully said that, like, am I meant to believe all of this still? Because it is lensed through the voice of anger, of retribution in these ways, right? And so we were talking before I hit record about how it ain't easy being a conspiracy theorist and how it can be very isolating, but I don't need to speak about that path, but it's been really rich for me lately and painful. But is that if you start going into these places, these hidden and suppressed places, and it can be easy to just attach ourselves to the way somebody that I've never met is sharing the information or whatever, instead of experiencing it, embodying it, patiently witnessing in a centered and a present way. You know what I mean? And so it's just nice to hear that in this kind of correlation, because that is something in my own experience. While it's different, although, I am intrigued by and passionate about the return of magic and the burning of the sorceress and the chasing of the shaman out of town and these types of things that are very much part of of history and herstory. But yeah, the rage and the anger that can be alive in that current sometimes feels to be more hurtful than helpful or healing. Also very necessary. And I don't know if you've seen this on your screen, Marya, but on my screen, there's been this sliver of an astrological chart flashing again and again. Have you seen that? It's really strange. I've never seen it on Zoom before. But it just asked me to remember to go into the astrology, and I want to do that. And first of all, do I have permission to share your chart with the folks looking? Because I think that's what's up on the screen. I'm going to share my screen now. Is that what's that? Yeah, here we are, Marya Stark. And so I want to talk about Venus, and Venus in Gemini. And this is one of the ways that Marya and I met. That I was doing a monthly presentation for all the archetypes. When it came time for Gemini, I really wanted to bring a bard in. I was bringing in guests that felt like resonant with the archetypes. And I wrote to a lot of friends, like, either I want a magician or I want a bard for the Gemini month. Does anyone know a bard? And most people said, what the heck is a bard, right? But one dear friend was like, oh, have you met Marya Stark, right? And I sent you an invitation about coming to be a bardess. And you said, that sounds so fun, but I live in California, dude. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I hadn't heard your name again until we were sitting side by side at a presentation I gave about Virgo some months later at Wonderland in Portland. It's such a special place for both of us. And there you were, and you ended up supporting me and singing and making music with this talk, which was so brilliant, and we've been connected since. And then I looked and I sent you a message on Facebook to say thanks. It was like, oh, whoa, there was this whole stream before. It was so wonderful. But I mention all of that because Gemini is such a great and beautiful essence of the Marya. So Marya, clearly a Cancer sun with Mars, and this is Ceres here. And so Venus in Gemini is reflecting Cancer light, and that becomes more and more important to me, to know that the source of great mystery, the key of your song, I like to say, is Cancer. And you as a musical healer, as you know, one of your many hats that you wear, I'll just share this for the crowd here, is music medicine. And you can talk about that in a bit if you'd like. But this side of you, first of all, Mercury in Leo at the midheaven, like an ultimate state of my vocation is bringing light, right, and radiance through art, and especially through the voice, Mercury. And this Venus in Gemini, what I love so much about that is the Gemini playful levity and incredible gift of language, which is one of your many kung fus, and those who know your music know this, and those who have experienced your communication classes and such really know this. But to bring this into the Venus work, because this project, as we know, is about Venus synodically in the overtone, I can just show that before your birth, Venus was aligned to the sun between Earth and Sun, and indeed with Mercury at that time in April 85 in the sign of Aries. And so we say, the nomenclature in shamanic astrology is that your Venus overtone, or the Meta goddess, is the Aries goddess. And it resonates with your Aries moon. And right now, we've got this Aries moon very close to yours. Today is Friday, Venus's day, October 14th. So why I wanted to go here, and I think I'll do it without the screen for a second, is that Gemini Venus reflecting Cancer light. So we have a playful goddess, the magician, the circus performer, the court jester, the bard. Really, like, to me, Gemini is the great gift of mind magic, but reflecting this Cancer light of family and tribe and connection and caring and nurturing. But in an Aries cycle. And coming from an Aries moon, to me, the sun is spirit and the moon is soul. And so what I hear in this and feel in this and witness in this is that in this Aries cycle, it really can be and has been the riot girl, and the one who very thankfully, the suffrage movement is when this point of the Venus star was born, in most recent times during the 19th Amendment coming online and women fighting for their right to vote and fighting for independence in so many ways. And there's that Aries nature of like charging into it. And it's been beautiful. But as I'll share moving forward, we're at a time in the history where that star point will soon shift from Aries and the fire into Pisces in the water. And the next cycle, like we're currently in this Leo cycle, we've been sharing all about that. The next cycle is an Aries cycle. So you'll start engaging with your Venus, 19-month Venus synodic return starting March next year. And it's the last Aries cycle of our lifetimes. And that Aries cycle is shifting into Pisces. So Kaylin Castell in the last chapter and I spoke about this some, and I'll be presenting more and more about the history of this. And the reason why I go here now is because part of my fear in sharing this are just like really sitting and literally daily contemplating, how do I present this information without sounding or speaking just from my wound or my envy, without salting others' wounds, these kinds of things. It's very difficult. Because what I've been feeling recently is that one of the great gifts that is re-emerging, is the power of true beauty. And that this is one of the gifts that the awakening divine feminine is here to return to our world. And one that we've been inviting and preparing for. And I was really blessed and touched to hear a sister in our community, Victory Lundquist, who's been spending time as like the head medic out at the Standing Rock front lines. And I'm hoping to interview Victory for the project as well. But one thing she said is that there at Standing Rock, which most of us know, is many, many tribes coming together. And actually, our tribe being invited to participate, to stand in solidarity to protect sacred water and the sacred at large. And Victory shared that women have been encouraged to stand at the front of the front line because it's always been known that the feminine is the guardian of water. But what really touched me in this, and it's odd, but it like brings these tears, from my heart, is that the women were encouraged by the elders not to stand in the front in like the masculine warrior spirit, but in their skirts, in the state of like feminine beauty, and to guard the water from that place. And so this is some of how I'm seeing the Venus star reshaping. And part of my tears that are forming now is also just thinking about Bina at this time, which I mean to get back to. But first, I just want to say, like, where you're born into the Venus cycle is Inanna descending, and she's released the crown, so clearing that clutter that would keep us from connecting to the divine. She's released the third eye, so clearing the clutter of perception. And so I really love this because she's in an Aries cycle, which can be that warrior and that pioneer, energetic, but releasing the clutter of the sixth of the third eye would say, oh, right, let's make sure that I don't align my perceptions to other people's energetics that might be more in a warpath. Because Gemini, I'm also here to bring some levity and to bring some music and to bring some story and to bring some mind magic. So we will be pioneers. We will, in a fire Aries way, which is the spark that starts the fire, bring real change to this world. But sometimes the greatest gift of that fiery essence, like a fire doesn't light without the air. And Gemini is the wind that blows, is this fun and fascinating truth of youth air to help us like take it easy a little bit. And Scorpio rising, so rising into this art of the heart, the magic as most of us think of magic, your South Node in Scorpio, Saturn in Scorpio, right? So there's a lot of wisdom and depth and history and lineage and passion for passion itself, and that true magic, like you've studied Taoist sorcery, But I like to say about Scorpio, what is rising when you rose is rising within you. This is what you're here to learn. And you're also here to raise it up. And the other point of the Venus star that will change in the near future is the Scorpio point. So two of these dynamic and beautiful archetypes that you're so connected to, Aries, we can just look at your moon, Scorpio, we can just look at your ascendant, are alive in the Venus cycle. She also has a point in Gemini. And they're two of the ones that are shifting. And so my feeling when I look at Venus in this way in a woman or a man's chart is to honor how we are assisting in our own song, our own personal experience and expression, assisting something greater, where the chart is the frame of the film, but we're also born into a scene. And the scene that you're born into is so beautiful because this next cycle, this next Aries cycle, is the last in one of those star points in Aries that's been around for over 100 years. And so there's this beautiful culmination and this, I think, courageous gift of moving from that Aries energy and that fire energy into the waters of Pisces and into compassion and into empathy and into healing and into the dream world. And it's such a challenging time for this because right now, as we're recording this, there is this absolute clown on the bandstand bringing up like the darkest, sexist, racist statements. Like, how can we not go into warrior space to protect ourselves from that? And that's meant to stir up this anger and that kind of thing. But how can we move into that, center into that, and then also release the anger so we can move into it in a more beautiful and sovereign way, as you kind of stated at the beginning of this thing. So there's two places I want to go after that 1,000,000-word statement. One is to honor, and for the first time in this work so far, Bina, who this 13th flower is in so many ways livicated to. Because I feel that, she transitioned, she passed away with Venus in the underworld, and Venus in the underworld in Scorpio. And there were 3 women in the local community who passed at that time, and all in the waters, which seemed really resonant for Scorpio. And it was the last time, as I'll show in future chapters, how the kind of death and rebirth point of the Venus star was in Scorpio. It was the last time until like 2170 something. Okay, so the last time in our life. And the symbol for that point was the rigid bottle of perfume lies shattered, releasing its fragrance, the Sabian symbol. And I honor that perhaps as one of the gifts that these women gave in their transition at this powerful time, to remind us that we are here to retrieve the true magic that was destroyed, but not through anger and not through resentment or resistance, but through opening to life and to beauty and to fragrance and to art. And Bina's message, as yours, from the way that my ears tune into your beautiful songs, is so much about life as art. And that brings me to this Venus cycle, which is a Leo cycle and is meant to be playful and passionate and sovereign and alive and very artful. So I was hoping, Marya, just as we're kind of wrapping things up here, if you could share with us about Bina and about life as art and music as a healing modality.
Thanks. Well, and honoring Bina is such I met her through an astrology project with Verderluz, and Ver called me and Bina together to come support this birthing of the Ophiuchus myth. So we got to go into all of these like dark witchy kind of owly and all kinds of stuff, and Bina was just right in the midst of it all. She was called because she's got that Hecate and Inanna. Like she embodied all of that snake medicine. She had a snake. And so meeting her in that way was really fun. It's such a powerful time. We met during the eclipses of 2011 and during the whole tribal convergence. And so there was this sort of underpinning energy of our relationship of like, oh, there's something that we get to explore here together. And that, and all of this like unbridled joy, right? Like I wrote this song, Unstoppable Joy. She picked up on it right away, loved it, wanted to film it, started developing a music video idea with me. She was just like my main team player. So she was the first person in my life to really help me integrate these two seemingly separate parts of my being, which is this like rainbow, unstoppable joy, like exalted, happy, like place, and then this like dark, like scarlet moon, enchanted by the Scorpio, needing to like go into the shit. And like for years I'd been creating art seemingly in these two separate vicinities, and Bina represented to me is like, no, this is your life. This is all of you. You don't have to like make two different brands, because sometimes you write happy songs and sometimes you write songs about like that you're angry about, which is being burned. Like, that's okay. Like, you can be one person doing both of that. And so it was really helpful and therapeutic for me to like, when Bina passed away, I was prepping to release Unstoppable Joy, and I was going to do it I did it in this big show where we told the Scarlet Moon Chronicles, which was some of these other stories. And I just remember sharing at the time at that event that about Bina's influence in my life, and really like accepting these various aspects of myself as like an integrated art project, that like this could be life as art. And so I went from this place of like trying to like make art work for some like focal point of like branding, and like I kind of that all fell away. She just sort of helps me dissolve into being art and like being an expression as a vehicle for healing and trust, and like trusting in that. Like Bina had this amazing capacity to just see people's gifts and draw them out, and me knowing that this was part of my life path for years, but her seeing that and like permissioning it on some level and acknowledging it and appreciating it and fluffing it up just helped me sort of grow my root system into that part that like I hadn't fully dropped into my own womb inside of that mission until Bina really brought me there. So just honoring that place with her, and again, like the profound joy of life that we get to just be in the cauldron of creative expression as a way. I listened to this thing by Clarissa Piccolo Estes the other day. She was talking about like with creativity is part of, it's just as important as like passing gas or excrement. Like we have to do it as part of our like our psyche needs outlet. And that doesn't have to necessarily be painting or writing poetry. That could just be gardening, or it could be cleaning, or it could like making something beautiful. Like the impulse to create beauty, the impulse to have that, like we have to do that. And if any way we're blocked off inside of that, then we can create a backup. We can become very constipated and can create illness in our physical being, in our spirit. And so that for me is really like why the womb work, why the compassionate communication work, why all this thing. It's like, for me, it's all just avenues of how do I become more capable as a human to allow the creative process to move through me so that I can be a healthy being, and be that as a vessel for the benefit of all beings, right? Like how can I just attune my own energy to like that freedom, and be able to see everything that comes in resistance in the way. And so that's my life as art, dedicated to Bina and her influence, and this whole womb work, and all of the Inanna magic, you know, like Bina and I had that Inanna connection too. And so it felt really it feels really fun that that's how we met, right? Like we met right after she passed, and then Inanna, like here we go into the underworld inside of all of this.
Hmm.
Yay!
Just kind of want to breathe into that a little bit, and I picked out a teacup to fill for Bina as you were speaking, which ended up being the water element cup. I got some new cups, and I'm pouring a little more tea into the cup of Venus that was chosen for you.
Yes.
You. And yeah, Marya, I want to hopefully at some point do this more and further our experience. Just want to again say that we're at a time where Venus has risen. In fact, Marya and I were together in Santa Cruz on August 3rd, where Venus and Inanna was coming back through reclaiming the root chakra gate, and Marya and I recorded a pretty fun retelling, modern telling of the Inanna story, with me telling the story and Marya playing incredible musical accompaniments, and also some from a new friend of mine, an old friend of Marya's, Mikey Pauker. And I mean to share that on my storytelling podcast at some point soon. And I think we'll speak more. So in September, Inanna, then Venus rose, and the crescent moon came to embrace her to signal the retrieval of the second chakra, and really, I think bringing us maybe more for all of us into our womb work and into the suppressed sexuality work, and to take back that creative source also that can really be so alive in the second chakra. And then on October 3rd, Venus came, and she was embraced again by that crescent moon. And this was the coming into the third chakra, the solar plexus chakra gate, which has so much Leo essence. And she did this in the sign of Scorpio. And so I think we're now really called to kind of integrate that below, that grounding, that source of creation, sexuality, and then this radiance and this sovereignty, which is a word, an endless contemplation I really invite myself to engage with daily. And next we'll come into the heart, and then up into the throat and stuff. So Marya, I hope to interview you about some of the dream work and the speaking work and communication kung fu and these kinds of things. Marya and I recorded an interview about the communication work some time ago, but I never posted it. I have to look at it again. I just remember I was like so depressed and like mopey during the course of the interview, just where I was at. So sometimes we keep some of the cards in the hand. I want to share my screen again and just show a couple things to you folks before we split. This is Marya Stark music.com, and it is spelled like this. Here, maybe I can close some of these other things. So Marya Stark Music is the place to go to hear music and see videos and so many projects. I'm going to open that now. And we can see vocal coaching and workshops and compassionate communication and these kinds of things. So there's too much on Marya's website to explore for us to go into together now, but please head over there and check out Marya's many offerings. She is such an incredible giver, healer, awakening agent. And that being said, there's another site, Marya-Stark.com. And maybe Marya, could you just tell me a little bit more about the different...
Click the Learn More button. Click the Learn More button on that website right now. So this website, the first website was my professional music website, but this website is where you kind of see more of my big picture. This is my voice of my womb work, where I see clients individually through Skype. So if you're interested, please reach out. I do individual womb coaching and songwriting and investigation into the blood gates, and do more of that in-depth, deeper work. And this is where I do workshops as well. And as well as if you scroll down, you can kind of see this is where yeah, my sessions are at, and I also do the compassionate communication coaching groups and individuals and couples and families. And there's going to be a Prayers of the Womb retreat in Kona, Hawaii in January. So this one is going to be for women diving into the deep essence of the womb. If the men want to join in, there's one the week right before being led by Ayla Nerio, and she's going to be doing a voice cultivation workshop for and like finding your creative spirit. And we'll be doing the Prayers of the Womb. And yeah, this is where you see the other side of Marya. You got the music side, and you got the inner girl, whatever the fuck else I'm doing with coaching. All the other stuff.
Yeah, and the store at your music site, I'm sure we can find some of your albums here. It looks like
a bit of Bandcamp.
Bandcamp, huh?
Bandcamp. That's where music's happening. I'll have a better store at some point, but right now Bandcamp's the way.
And on Bandcamp, are we going to find, so Bina's Dream is something I'd love to see. I mean, before I go there, here's the project for kids that you just put out, which actually we find is for adults.
I just released this album for kids. I wrote it when I was doing my master's program in medical Qigong, and I realized like, wow, I really want there to be cool content for parents who are into the yogic arts, into meditation, so that they can raise their kids with this kind of information that I wish I had when I was a kid, but there wasn't necessarily books or music about it. And so I was like, okay, I got to create that thing. And so this is one in hopefully a series of content that's going to be created for the upcoming generation. That's family. It's made for the family. So it's that family can have tools and language about energy and about kind of like psychic development and dream development and qigong and things that can be done at all ages. That I find that I was aiming for the 0 to 6 age when things started to get locked in. And if you have kids at that age, they like to listen to things over and over and over and over again. So I was like, well, what could they listen to over and over again that would be fun for parents too, and that would have cool messages that would keep the magical thinking intact for years to come.
I'm one of those kids, and the Yin Yang song is like go-to move for me right now, and I get buried a little bit in some of my own personal pains and judgments of self and these kinds of things. This album has been like a really nice release for me that allows me to stay engaged with the magic and not like run away because I'm in a place of pain or I don't have the courage to go into spaces within me that are opening. It's nice to have opportunities to stay engaged but not have to do it in such a dark way, which is something that I feel sometimes a little addicted to, instead of like awakening through the light, and finding that balance. So that's part of the path, and I really appreciate the gift of this musical sharing. Marya's Garden album is something that's on like pretty permanent rotation around here too, and I highly recommend it. And there's videos and collaborations and all sorts of things that I really invite you to check out on Marya's site. And maybe you could just tell us about Bina's Dream, which was posted up here pretty recently, was it not?
Yeah, I just shared this album on September 30th, which was the 2-year anniversary of Bina passing. The first song, Bina's Dream, was a song I wrote just hours after I found out I got the call from Elijah, and I just spent the rest of the afternoon, evening writing and recording this song. Gave it to my friend Barry, put some cello on it. We released it a couple days later after the announcement had been made to their community. And then this other song, Life is Art, I wrote about a month later when I was in Hawaii, and just sort of coming to terms with it on a different level. And Theo of Entheo helped produce that track, and we've been holding it for a little while, almost a year it's been done. And his remix of Unstoppable Joy is just one of my favorite things ever. And of course, so this whole album, I was gonna do like a different album where I was gonna mix these in, but over August I was recording the Lineage album, which I mentioned earlier, and through the recording of that, I was just like, I think these songs, I just need to make them as an EP and release them. And then Theo called me that week. It was like, we should release these 3 songs as an EP for Bina's Day. And I'm like, okay, you got the message received. And so it was kind of, we like ran to the finish line, just like did it, which is in total Bina. Like that was just exactly the way Bina would have done it. And so it was fun to just feel that it emerged and it shifted and it finally birthed in a way that was so much like who she was. And so yeah, it was fun. I even made the cover art, which I've never done. I've never made my own cover art for an album. I'm way too like, I gotta make it perfect. I was like, okay, I'm gonna make it.
Beautiful too. Yeah, and so I'd love to end here with a song. Maybe we'll share the Life as Art song at the end of this interview.
Do it.
I wonder if that means that commercials are going to pop up throughout the course of this sharing, because it is on Bandcamp, because that's sometimes a thing. So
it's not on iTunes though,
so maybe. So I'll roll those dice, and it'd be really nice to bring Theo in. I mean to get down to Wonderland and to speak to Elijah and Amma and Theo and Eric and so many other people about Bina and about Wonderland and about this magical musical Life as Art prayer that she helped breathe into our community. And one thing that just really lifts my heart is that when a person so young and in their prime and power passes, it can be a source of just sadness and anger alone. But what I've seen is that it was a seed of this flower that is blooming in so many ways in our community. And it's nice to tune into that prayer. So all right. So folks, thank you again for tuning into this prayer and to the 13 flower work and to Dancing with Venus. Marya, if it's okay, I think I will sip your cup of Venus puer.
Tastes so good.
For you, and we will honor the circle of spirit over the cross of matter, the inhale, breathing spirit into the body. And Marya, thank you for being such a wonderful guide in that way. Folks, I hope that you will reach out to Marya, at least allow her music to dance through your ears now. And again, you can find her at maryastarkmusic.com or at marya-stark.com, and you'll be seeing her around here more and more. Thank you, sister.
Thanks, Gemini. Love you. Thanks for having me and doing this and offering your gifts in this way on such a consistent basis. Awesome.
Thank you, and I will see you in space.
See a dragonfly and I think of your wings, iridescent and joyfully reaching beyond what can be seen, flying in every direction while keeping perfectly still, harbinger of magic and play and a truth beyond what words can distill, and the power of love to arrive, and the power of the friendship spanning 1,000 lives, and the power of music that keeps you in my heart, and the power of living our sacred life as art. keeps you in my mind.